Picture this, it's Christmas morning. You're in pajamas, coffee's brewing, and suddenly, sirens. Because someone just got arrested for trying to steal a mall Santa's sleigh, wearing full elf gear. Yep, this isn't a movie, it's real life. Across America, people are doing unbelievably dumb things on Christmas and getting handcuffed for it. From fruitcake assaults to drone-delivered felonies, we counted 49 actual arrests that sound fake, but aren't. Stick around, 17 involves a reindeer, a zip tie, and zero common sense. And if you've ever nearly lost it during the holidays, you belong in the comments. Drop your I almost got arrested story below and smash subscribe before Santa adds you to the naughty list. An uncle at a busy mall decided that the Christmas display sleigh belonged to him, and he climbed onto it with the confidence of a man who believed he had a personal deal with Santa. Families watched him shake the reins and shout that he was taking the sleigh for a test ride. A mall employee tried to reason with him, but the uncle insisted he had seniority based on holiday spirit. Security ran over as he attempted to scoot the sleigh across the platform. The uncle lost balance and slid off the side. Shoppers gasped while kids pointed at the scene. Security guided him away as he continued to yell that the sleigh should respond only to him. His day ended in a very quiet office room. 2. A husband in Texas called emergency services on Christmas morning because he believed his holiday had been destroyed when he did not receive the game console he wanted. His wife stood behind him with disbelief while he told the operator that his seasonal joy had collapsed. Officers arrived expecting something serious and instead found him standing beside an untouched plate of waffles while holding a holiday gift bag like evidence. He scolded the officers for not understanding his emotional crisis. His teenage neighbor recorded the entire moment from the driveway and whispered that it felt like watching a grown man fail a holiday exam. The husband kept pacing until the officers calmly explained misuse of emergency calls. His morning finished with a very awkward silence. 3. A man dressed as Santa walked into a small-town bank with a gift bag and proudly asked for holiday donations, while forgetting he still wore a name tag that revealed everything. Staff stared at the tag while he attempted to deliver a dramatic speech about Christmas generosity. A cashier watched him gesture wildly like an actor in a school show. Customers looked confused as he shuffled toward the counter with exaggerated steps. A grandmother in line pressed the alarm because she felt something very wrong. Officers arrived and found him trying to hide the name tag by lifting his beard like a curtain. He walked out in disbelief while wondering how his grand plan failed so easily. Everyone exhaled slowly afterward. 4. A teen climbed onto a neighbor's roof on Christmas Eve while singing loud carols after finishing an oversized eggnog that he should never have touched. He removed every piece of clothing except a pair of holiday socks and insisted he was performing a rooftop concert for the entire block. Families stepped outside to see what the noise was about and found him wobbling beside a chimney like a confused reindeer. A sister shouted for him to come down, but he answered with another off-key verse. A neighbor called for help because he kept slipping toward the edge. Officers guided him down gently. He stood on the lawn swaying proudly. He later claimed the moon requested an encore performance. 5. A young man believed he had created the perfect Christmas prank when he threw a snowball at what he thought was a regular patrol car rolling down his street. He wanted a dramatic slow-motion toss and even yelled a heroic line before launching it. The snowball hit the side of the vehicle, and the teen froze when he saw armored doors and serious equipment. A neighbor gasped and covered her mouth. The man slowly backed away like someone trying to undo a mistake with his feet. Team members stepped out and asked why he had chosen that target. He nervously blamed the holiday energy surrounding him. They escorted him aside for a calm talk. His prank ended with silent regret. 6. A woman in a crowded store marched to the service desk with determination after deciding she needed to return a holiday sweater. She held a receipt proudly, yet the receipt did not match the item at all. The associate explained the issue patiently, yet the woman insisted the world of receipts worked by intention, not by purchase. Shoppers watched her argue like a contestant in a confused game show. A man behind her suggested checking her bags, but she waved him off and announced she knew retail law from many years of shopping. The manager arrived and tried again to explain. She attempted to walk out with a different sweater, believing she was correcting an error. Security intervened gently. She left still convinced she was right. 7. An older man stood in the middle of a peaceful church service and suddenly shouted that he hated Christmas with the force of a frustrated holiday spirit. Families turned around and stared as he raised his hands like he was calling for dramatic lighting. A choir member dropped a candle holder from shock. The man continued his loud declaration while pacing up and down the aisle, as if performing a one-person show. A teenager whispered to his mother that the scene felt unreal. The pastor asked him to calm down, yet he responded with another burst of noise. Someone contacted authorities because he refused to stop. Officers guided him outside slowly. He later told bystanders that the hymn echoes overwhelmed him. 8. A brother-in-law wearing a bright Santa hat made a sarcastic joke during dinner, and the reaction came from across the table when a man launched a full fruitcake directly at him. The cake hit his shoulder and crumbled across the carpet like a failed dessert demonstration. The grandmother gasped and dropped her fork. A cousin burst into laughter until the two men began shouting across the table like competing holiday mascots. A woman stood between them, but both continued arguing about respect and baked goods. A neighbor who heard the shouting through an open window reported the disturbance. Officers arrived and found crumbs everywhere. The brother-in-law removed the Santa hat and held it like a trophy. The man who threw the cake regretted everything instantly. 9. A young woman visited a petting zoo during a holiday event and saw a real reindeer standing calmly behind a wooden fence. She decided the reindeer looked lonely and needed a better home. She unhooked the small gate with the confidence of someone beginning a noble rescue mission. Families nearby watched in disbelief as she tried to guide the reindeer with gentle pats and encouraging words. The reindeer ignored her completely and walked in the opposite direction. A worker shouted for her to stop, yet she insisted she was helping the animal find freedom. Staff hurried over and guided the reindeer back to safety. Authorities were contacted because she refused to leave. She later told friends she bonded spiritually with the reindeer. 10. A husband at a busy department store believed he could master the mechanical bull set up for a holiday promotion. He wore festive elf ears and declared this would be the highlight of his season. His wife recorded as he attempted a dramatic mount that looked more like an accidental slide. The bull started moving, and he bounced uncontrollably while shouting for someone to adjust the speed. Shoppers gathered and laughed as he flailed across the seat like a confused seasonal mascot. A child pointed and said he looked like a holiday cartoon. When he fell onto the mat, he tried to climb back up for another attempt. Staff intervened because he ignored safety rules. His dignity stayed on the mat. 11. A man decided to light a Christmas tree candle while standing in his living room, and he leaned in too close with the curiosity of someone who trusted his own reflexes far too much. The flame reached a branch and caught faster than he expected. He panicked and called emergency services to report that he might have caused a small disaster. His neighbor ran over and saw smoke drifting past the window. The man opened the door holding a scorched ornament and announced that the situation had escalated beyond his control. Fire crews handled everything quickly. When officers asked how it began, he admitted he wanted dramatic holiday lighting. Everyone stared at the melted candle while he promised he would never attempt creative decorating again. 12. A teen spotted an open living room window in a stranger's house and noticed presents stacked neatly under the glowing Christmas tree. He believed the gifts were part of a neighborhood exchange and climbed inside with the confidence of a confused holiday volunteer. The homeowner walked in and saw him crawling toward the presents like a slow-moving elf. The teen proudly announced he was participating in the season of sharing. The homeowner stepped back and immediately contacted authorities. The teen tried to explain his misunderstanding while holding a wrap box like a loaf of bread. Officers arrived and led him outside gently. He sat on the curb staring at the house lights. He later told friends he thought generosity worked both ways. 13. A woman at a busy shopping mall removed her clothing until she stood in nothing but striped boxers and fuzzy socks because she wanted to prove she had the spirit of a true holiday icon. Families stared as she climbed onto a small stage beside a fake chimney. She spread her arms wide and announced her transformation into a festive hero. Children screamed and adults shielded their eyes. A store worker hurried over and asked her to step down. She insisted her performance would inspire the crowd. Security eventually arrived and guided her toward an office while she waved at shoppers like a celebrity making an exit. Her grandmother later said she always had a dramatic streak during holidays, and this time, it simply escalated too far. 14. A man walked into a grocery store carrying what he believed was a perfect homemade gift card crafted out of colored paper and glitter. He placed groceries on the counter and handed the card to the cashier with complete confidence. The cashier opened the card and saw nothing but scribbles and a hand-drawn logo. A woman in line covered her mouth to stop from laughing. The man insisted the card held magical holiday value and asked the cashier to scan it repeatedly. A manager stepped in and examined the card like a strange art project. The man tried to walk out with a bag of produce, believing the misunderstanding would resolve itself. Security intervened. He left the store holding the glitter-covered card like a failed invention. 15. Husband proudly rode a motorized reindeer float through his neighborhood after finishing a holiday party drink that he definitely should have avoided. He waved at passing cars and attempted to steer with one hand while shouting cheerful greetings. A neighbor walked outside to record the scene because the man kept circling the same cul-de-sac like a confused parade leader. Children pointed and laughed each time the float bumped a mailbox. The husband lost control on a corner and slid into a snowbank. He stood up and saluted the neighborhood as if completing an official route. Authorities were contacted due to the unsafe riding. He later sat on his porch with the broken antler piece resting in his lap while wondering how the idea felt so brilliant earlier. 16. A man called emergency services because his dog had eaten his entire holiday bonus check. He held the dog gently while explaining that the animal had committed financial sabotage. His wife stood in the doorway trying not to laugh as he presented the shredded paper like evidence. The operator calmly explained that this did not require immediate attention. The man still insisted the incident destroyed his financial confidence. A neighbor watched him pacing in the yard while talking loudly about the betrayal. Officers eventually visited to remind him that holiday accidents involving pets did not qualify as emergencies. The dog wagged its tail the whole time. The man later taped the remaining shreds to the fridge as a warning message for future seasons. 17. A young woman attempted to break into her ex-partner's house on Christmas morning because she wanted to return his old presents in a dramatic gesture of closure. She crawled through a side window and stepped onto a table covered in ornaments. A neighbor watering plants saw her fall into a pile of tinsel and gasp. She wandered through the living room, placing items on the couch like she was staging a display. The homeowner returned unexpectedly and found her arranging a snow globe on the armrest. She tried to explain that she was improving his emotional space. He immediately contacted authorities. Officers escorted her outside. She stood on the porch holding a sweater she planned to return and realized her plan needed more logic. 18. A young man trying to earn extra cash during the holidays collected wool from a local sheep farm and crafted floppy hats that he sold as genuine holiday accessories. He told neighbors that the wool came from a rare seasonal breed. An elderly woman bought one and sneezed repeatedly because the wool still held bits of grass. The farmer noticed missing wool and followed the trail until he reached the man's driveway, where hats hung on a clothesline. Shoppers gathered and examined the hats with growing suspicion. The farmer confronted him gently. The man insisted he was preserving Christmas craftsmanship. Authorities were called to sort out the confusion. The man later stood beside the empty clothesline, wondering why the plan sounded so clever earlier. 19. A husband played the same song repeatedly at an unbelievable volume because he believed it helped him clean his house faster on Christmas morning. He blasted the track for hours until neighbors stepped outside holding their ears. A child covered his head with a blanket to escape the noise. The husband danced around the backyard, shaking garland like streamers. His wife begged him to lower the volume, but he responded with another spin move. A neighbor finally contacted authorities because the ground felt like it vibrated from the sound. Officers arrived and found him jumping beside a speaker that looked ready to collapse. They asked him to turn it off. He stared at the silence afterward as if he had lost a personal battle. 20. A man noticed a police vehicle parked near a donation booth at a holiday festival and believed he could help the community by delivering gifts with official style. He approached the vehicle and tugged the door handle while rehearsing a speech. A woman watching nearby realized he misunderstood the purpose entirely. The man climbed inside and placed his holiday bags on the seat, like he was preparing for an important mission. Officers returned and asked why he entered the vehicle. He explained his plan proudly and pointed at the gifts. They guided him out while he tried to adjust his jacket with ceremonial seriousness. Bystanders whispered to each other about the strange misunderstanding. The man later walked home carrying his undelivered gifts with heavy footsteps. 21. A father prepared a Christmas turkey that came out darker than the night sky, and he became so frustrated that he called emergency services to report that his holiday dinner had been destroyed. His wife stared at him with disbelief as he insisted the meal disaster ruined the family harmony for the entire season. The children sat quietly at the table while watching him wave the burnt turkey like a warning sign. A neighbor overheard his loud complaint through the kitchen window. Officers arrived and reminded him that ruined poultry was not a matter for emergency assistance. The father lowered the turkey slowly and apologized with great embarrassment. His family ate sandwiches for dinner that night, while he promised to learn basic temperature settings. 22. A woman decided her cat would bring joy to the neighborhood if it delivered presents dressed as a holiday mascot. She squeezed the cat into a red suit and placed a tiny bag around its neck. The cat froze with an expression that suggested deep disappointment. She set the cat on the porch and encouraged it to walk forward. Instead, the cat lay flat and refused to move. A passerby watched the scene unfold while holding back laughter. The woman adjusted the outfit repeatedly until the cat finally stood up and walked into a bush. A neighbor contacted authorities after hearing loud complaints from the woman about the cat refusing its mission. Officers advised her to release the cat from duty. The cat strutted away proudly afterward. 23. A man at a Christmas parade believed he could improve the show by climbing onto a float shaped like a giant present. He ran up the side and attempted to stand proudly at the top. Performers dressed as elves reacted with confusion and hurried toward him. The float wobbled and he struggled to keep his balance while waving at the crowd. A child pointed at him and said he looked like a lost decoration trying to escape. Elves reached him and guided him down while he protested that he wanted to lead the parade. A parade coordinator contacted authorities due to the disruption. Officers escorted him away. He later sat on a bench holding a crushed candy cane and wondered why his timing always betrayed him. 24. An older man convinced himself that a real holiday thief lurked in his neighborhood, and he believed someone dressed as a legendary gift giver had stolen his presents. He stormed into his yard, pointing at a neighbor who carried a red coat in a bag of laundry. The older man shouted about stolen property while the neighbor tried to explain. Families outside stared as the older man held up the empty spot under his tree as proof. He called emergency services to report the theft. Officers arrived and discovered that he had forgotten his own delivery schedule, and the gifts had not been brought inside yet. He apologized and shook his head at the confusion. His neighbor walked home still holding the laundry bag awkwardly. 25. A teen at a large family dinner decided that mashed potatoes could be the perfect weapon during an argument with his cousin. He grabbed a spoonful and launched it across the table. The potatoes hit an aunt who gasped loudly and dropped her fork. The teen laughed until a second cousin retaliated with a scoop of cranberry sauce. Suddenly, the table erupted into a chaotic food battle that spread across the living room. A neighbor heard shouting and slipped in through the open door to check on the noise. He stepped directly onto a roll that slid under his shoe. Someone called authorities because the chaos refused to stop. Officers arrived to find walls covered in splattered side dishes. Cleanup continued long after dessert should have started. 26. A woman called emergency services on Christmas morning because she believed her tree was too short for the season, and she demanded equipment to extend it. She stood beside the small tree and pointed upward as she explained the issue. Her husband stood in the hallway shaking his head slowly. She insisted that the national holiday spirit required tall decoration and that she needed official assistance. A neighbor overheard her voice through the window and whispered to his family that this was the most unusual request he had ever heard. Officers visited and explained that tree height was not considered an emergency. She folded her arms and stared at the tree as if waiting for it to grow. Her husband suggested platform shoes for the decoration. 27. A young man visited a zoo hosting a holiday event and believed one of the reindeer looked lonely. He reached over the fence and attempted to guide it out for a gentle walk. The reindeer took a few steps, then stopped and stared at him with total disinterest. A family nearby watched the scene and whispered that he looked like a confused tour guide without permission. A zoo worker shouted for him to stop immediately. The young man insisted he was rescuing the reindeer from sadness. The worker contacted authorities. Officers guided him away, while the reindeer returned to its spot calmly. The man later told friends he felt a deep connection with the animal. The reindeer simply chewed hay without concern. 28. A man at a holiday market removed every piece of clothing except a necklace shaped like a candy cane and announced that he was celebrating seasonal freedom. Vendors stared while adjusting their displays to block the view. A mother hurried her children away from the scene. The man stretched his arms out as if performing a winter dance. A vendor contacted authorities because the man refused to leave the walkway. Officers arrived and guided him to a side area where he tried to defend his actions with a long explanation about artistic expression. They handed him a blanket and suggested a quieter interest. He wrapped himself reluctantly and followed them away from the crowd. Vendors slowly resumed their work after the unexpected performance. 29. A man who fell behind on rent attempted to offer a Christmas ham as payment. He placed the ham on the doorstep of his landlord and waited proudly for approval. The landlord opened the door and stared at the ham without understanding the gesture. The man explained that holiday generosity should count as financial coverage. The landlord disagreed and asked for the actual payment. The man insisted the ham held great seasonal value. A neighbor observed the exchange from his porch while holding a mug of cocoa. The disagreement grew until authorities were contacted. Officers explained the situation calmly. The man walked home with the ham tucked under his arm. He told himself he might turn it into sandwiches instead of currency. 30. A woman stood near a street performer playing cheerful carols, and she suddenly shouted that she wanted absolute silence for the rest of the holiday. People passing by stopped and stared as she waved her arms like someone directing invisible traffic. The performer kept playing until she stepped closer and repeated her demand. A teen recorded her outburst and whispered that she needed a calm hobby. She grabbed a handful of snow and tossed it upward, as if demonstrating frustration. A nearby resident contacted authorities because the disturbance continued. Officers spoke with her calmly. She sighed heavily and walked away while brushing snow from her coat. The street performer resumed playing quietly. A child tossed a coin into his bucket afterward. 31. A father discovered his kids opening presents early on Christmas morning, and he became so shocked that he called emergency services to report a festive violation. His children sat on the floor surrounded by wrapping paper while he paced around the room holding an ornament like a microphone. His neighbor heard him complaining loudly through the open window. The father insisted the children had destroyed all sense of holiday order. Officers arrived expecting something serious and instead found cheerful kids showing off toys. They reminded the father that family conflicts did not belong in emergency channels. He apologized slowly while staring at the open boxes. The children continued playing happily. The father made pancakes afterward and declared a new rule that patience required supervision. 32. An older man spotted a tall tree in a public square and decided it looked abandoned. He walked toward it with a confident stride and began tugging at the trunk as if claiming it for his living room. A woman walking her dog watched him pulling with great determination. The man tried to tip the tree, but it barely shifted. He stepped back and tried a new approach by hugging the trunk and leaning backward. The woman finally contacted authorities when he announced that the tree belonged to whoever appreciated it the most. Officers arrived and found him attempting one final tug. They informed him that public decorations were not up for adoption. He stepped aside reluctantly. His dog escort neighbor laughed as she continued her walk. 33. A teen noticed Christmas lights that stretched across his yard and into his neighbor's property, and he believed he could sell them online as rare holiday decor. He unplugged the lights on his side and took pictures with great enthusiasm. He posted them online while standing beside the glowing strands still attached to the neighbor's home. A man walking his dog stopped and stared at the strange scene. The neighbor stepped outside and asked why the lights were being photographed. The teen proudly explained his plan. The neighbor shook his head and contacted authorities. Officers visited and found the teen trying to detach the final hook. They advised him to respect property boundaries. He removed the listing and walked inside looking very defeated. 34. A woman built a snowman in her backyard and decided the snowman needed dance lessons to impress the neighbors during the season. She poured a small amount of eggnog into a cup and raised it like a cheer. After finishing the drink, she attempted to guide the snowman through dance steps. A teen next door watched her spin around while holding the snowman's stick arm. She kept repeating moves with great enthusiasm until she slipped and fell into a snowbank. The teen contacted authorities when she continued shouting instructions at the snowman. Officers found her standing proudly beside the snowman while claiming the lesson had been a success. She promised to offer advanced classes next winter. The snowman leaned slightly forward from the effort. 35. A man sat in his car and listened to his GPS announce a cheerful holiday message. He panicked and believed the device had been hacked by pranksters. He called emergency services to report the unexpected greeting. A woman walking nearby saw him waving his arms while pointing at the screen. The operator tried to reassure him, yet he continued describing the message with dramatic concern. Officers arrived and found him sitting stiffly with the GPS held away from him like a dangerous object. They explained that seasonal messages were part of standard updates. He let out a long breath and looked embarrassed. He placed the GPS gently on the dashboard. The woman walking by covered her smile with her scarf. 36. A brother received a wrapped present from his sibling, and he opened it slowly. When he discovered it was not what he expected, he became irritated and struck his sibling on the shoulder, using the wrapped package like a harmless bat. Their mother gasped and stepped back. The brother claimed he had simply demonstrated the spirit of honesty. The sibling threw his hands up and called for help loudly. A neighbor heard the shouting and contacted authorities. Officers arrived and asked what caused the conflict. The brother pointed at the gift and insisted it invited a dramatic reaction. The officers explained that frustration did not justify hitting anyone. The family sat together afterward in awkward quiet. The gift remained unopened on the table. 37. A young man walked into a local park and noticed a small Christmas tree near a path. He believed it needed a new home, and he attempted to pull it from the ground with the confidence of someone starting a noble rescue. A couple walking by stopped and watched him struggle with the tree. He wiped his forehead and tugged repeatedly as if expecting the tree to cooperate. The couple tried to explain that the tree belonged to a community group. He insisted he was helping the tree reach its full potential. The couple contacted authorities when he refused to stop. Officers arrived and explained the rules. He released the tree reluctantly. The couple continued their walk while whispering about his determination. 38. A group of people gathered at a busy intersection and gasped when an older woman stepped into the middle and began reenacting a holiday nativity scene. She placed props on the pavement and struck a dramatic pose. Cars slowed down and drivers stared in confusion. A teen standing nearby tried to guide her back to the sidewalk. She insisted the message required a grand stage. Pedestrians moved around her with difficulty. Someone contacted authorities after she refused to budge. Officers arrived and gently escorted her to a safer spot. She held her props proudly as they walked. Drivers moved forward again. The teen shook his head softly at her dedication. 39. A man was pulled over for speeding in his decorated vehicle that he believed resembled a flying sleigh. He stepped out and offered the officer a plate of fresh cookies as a seasonal bargain. The officer declined. The man insisted the cookies held great symbolic value. A neighbor walking by with her dog noticed the exchange. She whispered that she had never seen anyone attempt cookie negotiations. The man presented the plate again with hopeful eyes. The officer explained that food did not serve as acceptable bargaining. The man lowered the plate slowly and returned it to his car. The neighbor continued her walk, shaking her head gently. The man drove home afterward at a much slower speed. 40. A husband attended a mall holiday event where a performer dressed as a beloved seasonal figure greeted families. The husband suddenly removed his clothing until he remained in his underwear and announced that he wished to reveal his true identity. Children screamed and parents pulled them away quickly. A security guard hurried over and begged him to put his clothing back on. The husband refused and stood proudly on a bench. A shopper contacted authorities. Officers arrived and guided him off the bench. He defended his actions passionately. They handed him his clothing and directed him to a private area. The crowd slowly returned to the event. The husband walked away holding his pants at his side. 41. A man stormed into his kitchen on Christmas morning and yelled loudly that his wife had ruined the entire holiday because she forgot to bake his favorite pie. He paced back and forth while pointing at the empty counter like he was presenting evidence in a courtroom. His wife folded her arms and watched him melt down over dessert. A child peeked from behind the hallway, wondering what disaster could come from one missing pie. The man called emergency services and demanded justice for his taste buds. Officers arrived and listened as he explained his crisis in full dramatic detail. They reminded him that pie emergencies were not recognized situations. He sighed and sat quietly at the table. His wife baked cookies instead. 42. A teen found an old mall photo booth offering printed pictures with a holiday character. He grabbed a printed photo and ran outside while shouting about scoring free rare artwork. A woman nearby watched him pose proudly with the picture, as if he discovered valuable treasure. He attempted to sell it at a small outdoor stand he built from cardboard. Shoppers laughed as he described the photo like a masterpiece from a forgotten collection. The booth attendant spotted him and contacted authorities. Officers asked why he believed the photo belonged to him. He explained his belief that anything unguarded qualified as a gift. They corrected him calmly. He packed up his cardboard stand and walked away with the picture tucked under his arm. 43. A young man decided that delivering presents by drone would impress his friends. He attached small wrapped boxes to a drone and launched it with a confident cheer. The drone wobbled and drifted over a parking lot. A woman walking her dog watched the device swerve dangerously close to a tree. The man tried controlling it using frantic hand gestures. The drone kept rising until it flew directly toward a building. It crashed into a wall beside a security post and dropped the presents everywhere. A worker contacted authorities after seeing the crash. Officers arrived and asked him about his plan. He explained his ambition proudly. They advised him to keep drones away from official buildings. He collected the damaged packages slowly. 44. A man at a children's holiday event suddenly climbed onto a small stage and shouted loudly that he was not a beloved seasonal hero, but a famous holiday villain. He waved his arms wildly while parents pulled their children closer. A woman recording the show gasped as he delivered dramatic gestures. Performers stood frozen as he stomped in circles. A volunteer approached and asked him to step down. He continued shouting. Someone contacted authorities due to the disruption. Officers arrived and spoke to him gently. He stepped down reluctantly. The children resumed their event quietly. The man walked away holding his jacket with theatrical disappointment. He later told a friend that he simply wanted to make the show more realistic. 45. A woman stood outside her home staring at her holiday lights and complaining that they glowed far brighter than she expected. She called emergency services and requested that someone shut off the power because she believed the lights had gained unnatural strength. A neighbor watering plants watched her point at the lights with dramatic concern. The neighbor tried to explain that brightness levels could be adjusted easily. She refused to believe it and insisted something supernatural was happening. Officers visited and checked the situation. They told her the lights were regular decorations. She sighed and unplugged them slowly. The neighbor returned to watering plants while shaking his head. The woman decided she preferred candles for the season. 46. A man placed reindeer antlers on his dog and announced that the dog would now serve as his official holiday mascot. He kept the antlers on the dog for hours and encouraged the animal to pose beside decorations. A teenager walking by saw the dog sitting stiffly with an expression of mild misery. The man insisted the dog loved the attention. The teen suggested removing the antlers. He refused. The dog eventually lay down in defeat. A neighbor contacted authorities after hearing the man shouting instructions at the dog throughout the afternoon. Officers visited and asked him to remove the antlers. He obeyed slowly. The dog ran into the yard, shaking its head with great relief. The man called it a rehearsal. 47. A man walked into a small bank with a handwritten note explaining that he needed money for holiday gifts. He placed the note on the counter and waited proudly. A teller read the note and noticed that he had signed it with a festive name. A customer in line raised an eyebrow. The man tapped his foot impatiently, like he expected applause for creativity. The teller pressed a button quietly. Officers arrived and asked him about the note. He explained that he believed honesty would soften the situation. They informed him it did not. He left the bank escorted and deeply confused about why his strategy had failed. A customer whispered to another that it felt like watching someone misunderstand every rule ever created. 48. A teen built a small robot from spare parts in his garage and believed he could teach it to sing carols. He programmed it to shout holiday phrases and activated it in the driveway. The robot spun in a circle and yelled cheerful greetings at full volume. A neighbor stepped outside to see what caused the noise. The teen clapped proudly as the robot repeated the same phrase again and again. The robot rolled off the driveway and bumped into a mailbox. The teen chased it while shouting instructions. A passerby contacted authorities due to the disturbance. Officers arrived and watched the robot yell another greeting into the air. The teen powered it off reluctantly. He carried it inside like a misbehaving child. 49. A woman rushed into her living room after hearing strange noises near the porch and believed someone was trying to steal her decorations. She ran outside with a flashlight and found a raccoon dragging a shiny ornament across the yard. She shouted at the raccoon and chased it across the grass. A neighbor stepped outside and watched her sprinting after the animal with great determination. She cornered the raccoon near a fence and announced she would perform a citizen rescue. The raccoon hissed and darted away. She called authorities and reported a serious theft attempt. Officers arrived and explained that wildlife sometimes collected objects. She retrieved the ornament from the grass. She carried it inside, feeling both proud and exhausted. Christmas does strange things to people. Every year, ordinary families wake up expecting calm mornings, yet somehow chaos sneaks in, wearing tinsel and holding a mug of eggnog. These stories prove that even the quietest neighborhood can turn into a holiday circus the moment someone decides a tree is too short or a reindeer needs rescuing. What makes it wild is how real each moment feels, because everyone has that one relative or neighbor who could accidentally start their own Christmas disaster movie at any time. So here's the real question. If you had to confess one holiday moment that almost sent your season off the rails, what would it be? Drop it in the comments right now, because the next video might feature your chaos, and hit subscribe before your next holiday turns into point number 50.